Hello and welcome to my second podcast, this one with a bit of video. And I have the absolutely gorgeous Dahlia that has come to join me all the way from Leeds. Hi there, Dahlia. How are you doing?
Hello. I am, well, do you know what? I am stressed but well dressed because this top makes me happy. But oh my gosh, Loulou, I am hot today. It is boiling even up here in Leeds.
Yeah, we have decided to do this on the hottest day of the year, but there is good reason for us doing it today. And that's because we have something to celebrate. I met Dahlia because she has an amazing podcast called Stressed but Well Dressed, and she is about to release the 100th episode.
About to release, yeah, the 100th episode is coming on Friday. So we probably should have had a glass of champagne or at least some kind of cocktail whilst we were doing this. But thank you. I am so excited and super excited for you, Loulou, to be launching your own podcast as a part of the way that you talk to your audience. So I think it is a double celebration.
Thank you very much. Well, you've definitely been integral in that inspiration, seeing the way that you reach out to people and the way that you built this podcast has really added fuel to my fire. And obviously I've been absolutely honored to be on your podcast twice. But first of all, I did ask you to prepare a few lessons. Is that something you'd be up for sharing? The 5 things that you've learned in the podcast? Because I think I need to have this insight about how to run a podcast.
Yeah, I think the first thing for me is whenever I think we're so lucky in today's world because we've got all of these channels, all of these opportunities through social media, through Substack, through podcasts to be able to get our voice out there and have it heard in a way that if you think back to when we were growing up, and I was talking about, magazines today actually online, everything was so curated and so edited, and the majority of us were just consumers of content. But we now all have the opportunity to do both be a creator and a consumer, which has good sides to it and has more challenging sides to it as well. But if we're talking about the good, the first thing I think you have to do if you want to put yourself out there and do a podcast is just go for it. And I know that sounds really, really simple, but I think it's easy. And I meet lots of people who think, oh God, I'd love to start a podcast. They tell me, I am going to start a podcast in the future at some point when I feel ready. And I think often, we have these ideas about what we want to do and we pin them into the future and we almost bet on a future version of ourselves that will be confident enough to do that. And I think the first thing that you have to do is you just have to try it. You have to go for it. So yes, spend a little bit of time, and I'll talk less about the technical and more about the kind of psychological opportunities to start a podcast and what it means. But I think, once you investigate a little bit of tech, the majority of the reasons people don't start is because they just don't want to put their voice out there. And, they've got this burning desire, but there's this cringe that holds them back. So I think my first piece of advice is don't bet on your future self, bet on your current self and start it now.
Oh, that's fantastic. And what was that moment for you that you were like, why did it become your present day? What was the moment that made you go, I'm just going to crack on?
Yeah, I'd always worked for big organisations and I got made redundant in the beginning of 2023, completely unexpected. And it did quite honestly knock me for 6 from a confidence perspective. We talk about identity. The way that I would equate that to fashion or clothes is that I was all dressed up with nowhere to go. I had all the gear, I had a work wardrobe, but more than that, I had the dressage almost, if you think about it in terms of the accreditations. And I didn't have somewhere to go and deploy that and use it and wear stuff. And I just felt really lost. And I thought, I don't want my voice to shrink. I'm going to amplify it. So I'm going to start something, almost a brand, a platform, which is mine, which I own, which no one else signs off, which no one else has to give me permission to do, almost create my own permission. And Stressed but Well Dressed was that. But it was also so much more than that, really, because I was so stressed in that moment. And what I talk about is well dressed being a mindset. And through the podcast, through the amazing people I've met, it's been a learning journey for me. And it's actually helped me in terms of balance and getting to that more well-dressed growth mindset. So I think that for me was the trigger. And I think there was always, you want to do something, you've got an opportunity to put something out there, all of those things, why someone might want to start a podcast. But I think it's so easy to have all of that ambition, but then the last hurdle, which is getting over yourself and just doing it, is the one that often holds us back.
Yeah, it's so true. I mean, I think that I've been wanting to do this for absolute years, and obviously I've got a bit of a platform already. And it was the fact that I took the leap into Substack, which has this opportunity for me to do the podcast. But I was like, the technical side of thing kind of overwhelms me. So how can I have the path of least resistance and at least do something and it not be perfect? But I do think that being around someone like yourself has been that inspiration for me. Was there someone that you had, like, was there a podcast that you looked at or a host or anyone that you kind of listened to and it inspired you?
Listen to podcasts that are very, very different to the one I do. So I listen to two podcasts, which are Scott Galloway and Adam Grant. So they're very much about kind of thought leadership, like psychology, and then in the business world as well. And I am very loyal to them, and I will admit haven't listened or do listen to others, but those are the ones I stick with. I think for me, actually, that the funniest thing, and I told her this, is that the guest that I've got coming on my 100th show is Joe Elvin, who was the editor of Glamour. And there's a huge story behind that, super exciting. But when I was made redundant, I actually listened to a podcast that Joe Elvin had done with, I think, Anna Whitehouse at the time, about her redundancy from Glamour. And for me, there's so much shame and so much emotion that comes when you get made redundant. If anyone's listening and they've been made redundant, they'll know how it feels. And having someone who to me had always been so iconic, talking so openly about it and just being honest was so inspirational. And I think the second tip is to realize that podcasting is a very different medium to other mediums. So, you know, we're taught to consume so much so quickly. We talk about social media and you could be looking at someone trying to sell you skincare and then someone parading an outfit in front of you and then like an image of a geopolitical conflict all within a 20-second period. And we become desensitized to information. But podcasts are so intimate because, you know, they're in your ear. It's a conversation. You're listening to it, and you can't, it's very difficult to listen to something else or consume something else of that kind of digital content at the same time. So you do it whilst you're walking the dog or going for a run or traveling or folding laundry or whatever it is you're doing. So there's, I think, a real intimacy to podcasts. And that means that, you know, when you're starting it, if your listens are lower than you're seeing, if you've got an Instagram platform or whatever it is, you're asking for a much bigger percentage of people's time and attention. So I think it's worrying less about the analytics at first and just really continuing to go and build.
So is that your second tip?
That's probably my second tip. Don't worry about how many people are listening to it. Think more about the amount of time they're spending listening to each episode, and really think about how you can capture their attention throughout the episodes and how long you want them to be. You know, some people recommend a podcast episode to me of something that's 3 hours long, and actually you just think that the commitment that is needed to continue that over a 3-hour period, unless you're on a plane or something, is significant. So just think about length. I always try and do 30 minutes because I think that's a dog walk, isn't it? It's or a run. That's a manageable amount of time.
Yeah, that's fantastic advice.
And
I'm taking note.
Third piece of advice is obviously think about who you want on the podcast, whether you want it to be yourself or whether you want it to be guests, and be relentless about this. So
I have to, just before you even dive in, I have to say, this is the thing that has inspired me more than anything, Dahlia, is your ability, the guests you've had on, your ability to reach out, to know who you want. Tell me more about that, because I've found it incredible.
I think be specific about who you want and why you want them. And I talked about the fact that podcasts democratize voices. It doesn't always have to be the most famous person in an industry, because I think generally most people have a phenomenal story to tell if you can just tap into them and what they want to share. So I think really listen to what and think about why you want people on your podcast, what value they'd add, what you'd be asking for them to share in terms of information. All of that's really important, and just being mindful that, you know, it's not about exploiting if you think they have an amazing story. It's about making them comfortable with sharing it in the right way. But I also think don't discount people because they don't have huge credentials attached to their name. Again, they might have something fantastic to share. I think someone said, I listened to an amazing podcast about building your podcast, and they said if everyone you're asking to come on your podcast is saying yes, you're not stretching yourself enough, which I thought was very interesting. They said you should go for the no's in terms of guests. And I was embarrassed to ask certain people in case they said no, because, you know, how mortifying if someone says no to being on your podcast. But I will admit, some of the people who've come on I asked 3 or 4 times. And it might be that they don't notice the request, or, it's not the right time for them, or it's not something they want to focus on at the time. But I think, obviously don't stalk people, but if there's someone that you want on, really make the case for it and think about why you want them on and give them the why as well. But don't hold back from asking someone because you think they're going to say no. That's a reason to ask them.
It is incredible. And do you generally use LinkedIn to get in touch with people?
Like, I think about where they're most active and they're going to see it. So LinkedIn is generally how I've got so many people, but Instagram's been really good for getting people as well. And I always think it's useful to recommend a friend too. So if someone's been on, I ask them to recommend someone else. Who else do you think would be great to be on it? Can you introduce me? All of those things, just kind of build out your network and keep the connections. And sometimes it won't be immediate. It will be kind of in 6 months' time, they'll think of someone or they'll recommend someone. And actually, I have quite a lot of people asking me now, which is great. But I think, again, just think about the themes that you want on it. So don't be dictated to by people who want to come on your podcast. Think about actually your listeners, what's going to engage them, which episodes they resonate the most with, and therefore which themes are important.
Okay, so be bold with who you're asking and keep
bold. Yeah, definitely.
Right. What else have you learned? What's your
So what have we got? We've got kind of fear the cringe and do it anyway.
get started? Let's go.
We've got to get started. Be bold. Don't worry too much about having hundreds of thousands of people listening to it. Okay, the next one is be consistent. So set yourself a goal in terms of like how frequently you want to release a podcast and hold yourself to account to that. And I think for me, I didn't know at the beginning, I'll be honest. I only wanted to release one podcast. Like it wasn't about a show. It was about, I want a podcast. And after I'd done one, I was like, okay, right, what's going to happen now? Because I want another. So I quickly had to build up a repertoire of guests. And it's like anything, the first person I interviewed was a school mum from the playground. The second one was my best friend. The third one was my mum. The fourth one was a cousin who was an actress. And then the fifth podcast was someone that I didn't know, who was Carolyn Mayer, and she took a punt on me and came on this podcast. And actually there was a bonus episode which was my kids within all of that. So, just have your first few guests lined up, but be consistent. Think about, give yourself no room for errors. So I now have enough episodes recorded that I could probably release episodes until September and not have to record any. There's two good things about that. First of all, it takes the pressure off. Second of all, it allows you to flex the recordings that you put out based on what's going on at the moment, based on the previous recording. I would say you want to change it up a bit for your listeners. You don't want 3 weeks of identical topics. So just think about the mix of that, but stick to the kind of the rhythm that you want, and then like make sure you hold yourself to account. Because I don't know what the drop-off rate is, but there's a huge amount of people who say they want to launch a podcast show, do 6 episodes, and then kind of so set yourself up for success in that way. I wish I'd have been more planned in terms of my guests. Mine was a bit rolling and evolving, and now I'm much clearer about kind of what I'm going to do and when.
I think that takes time. I mean, at the moment, I'm just rolling with the punches and seeing what happens. But I know that everyone that I bring on, I'm intrigued and curious about. And I think that hopefully the people that intrigue me will then speak to the wider audience. But yeah, I think that I love that your mum came on. What did you learn about your mum during?
I learned a lot about my mum is an amazing businesswoman. She has worked in so many different organisations, so many different countries, and run her own organisation for a long time as well. And it was really nice to hear her story from her perspective, stuff that kind of when I was growing up, and I remember it from my perspective, seeing it through her lens, which are the questions that you don't always get to ask her. And I actually said to someone before she came on, oh, is it a bit cringe, my mum coming on? And this woman, unfortunately, her mum was very poorly, and she said, you know what, I would have given anything to be able to interview my mum in this way. So that for me was really, really massive. Amazing. And I think the fifth tip that I would say is, like anything, it can be all consuming. You want to promote it all the time, you want to do everything. Decide how much time you're willing to give to it, how important it's going to be for you, and kind of commit to that, because it can take over your life, as all of these social media things can. So, decide why you're doing it, what the purpose of it is, and stick to that. I'm not very good at that one.
Well, I think when you're running your own business, it all bleeds over, and it takes a lot of energy to be very boundaried. But I think even having that intention, and I've found just blocking out times at times when I'm working on things in my calendar has really helped me to stay more boundaried. But that is fantastic advice. So you've given me so much advice about setting up a podcast, but obviously the whole point of what you're talking to people about is style, confidence, fashion, the psychology behind it all. I'd love to understand more about how that's impacted your sense of yourself. Like, what have you learned about style during the time of interviewing everyone?
Yeah, probably quite a lot actually. And it's funny because today I'm wearing, and I've just put it on now. I didn't know what to wear because, as I said, it was roasting. So I'm wearing what I call a holiday shirt that it's usually reserved for the pool. It's never fully dressed. I absolutely love the prints that never fully dressed do. It's got like fruit machines all over it.
So
It
fun.
is quite fun, but actually, bizarrely, my style has muted significantly since I've come on the podcast, and I'm okay with that. So I talked about the beginning of it, feeling stressed but well dressed, and all dressed up and nowhere to go. My style a couple of years ago was a little bit outrageous, I would probably say. And I mean, we're not crazy outrageous, but lots of big prints, lots of look at me things, lots of big like colours and really bold. But actually, before I got made redundant, I was working for an organisation that didn't necessarily feel like it was somewhere that I belonged. And I have realised through the podcast, through the conversations, because so many people talk about clothing in relation to identity and belonging and validation, I was choosing clothes that stood me out rather than allowed me to fit in, but stood me out because I actually wanted to distance myself from the culture of the organisation, and I wanted to be seen as different. So was I 100% comfortable in what I was wearing? I mean, I wasn't uncomfortable, but I knew that they were kind of shock and awe pieces to some extent. Shock and awe in a work environment is still relatively work appropriate. But I think I've actually relaxed into myself through the podcast. I've built my inner confidence. And actually, that means that I don't necessarily need all of those look at me pieces that I felt like I needed previously. And my everyday is a lot more relaxed. I feel really comfortable and really good in like a t-shirt and blazer and jeans and like nice loafers, or that sounds really boring, but it doesn't have to feel as, I guess, orchestrated as it was
Style.
before. Yeah, styled's probably the right word. And I think for me, there's a piece that actually I've kind of relaxed into myself through doing this. It's been a massive opportunity to learn about me. I've had to get far more comfortable with sharing parts of myself, my life online that I hadn't before. That's about having the voice, right? And about kind of opening up to people and building that rapport that you need to kind of connect with the guests, but also to connect with the listeners of the show. And through that, I do feel more confident in who I am. And perhaps that's why the clothes don't need to do as much of the talking.
Really interesting. Really interesting. I think it's one of those things of how do we get to a point where we feel a sense of peace within ourselves and, like you say,
Yeah.
relax into ourselves. And, knowing that we have the clothes in our wardrobe that can take us through these into our life and feel ready for those different moments. But I think it's fascinating that obviously clothing has been a part of your journey of either standing out or fitting in, or it's been something that's obviously been so integral to you and feeling at peace. But I'm really pleased to hear that you've settled into yourself more. Do you feel
I
like
think
you're wearing more of your wardrobe, or less?
I've definitely got less clothes than I had before. So I did a huge overhaul of my wardrobe last year. So I think I'm wearing more, but I have less. So I'm being more considered maybe in what I wear. But I'm definitely trying to shop my wardrobe more. And I think that is a theme I see from so many people. I've talked about it a lot on the podcast. I had Tiffany Dark come on and talk about the work she's doing in terms of rule of five and sustainability. And that is one of the most popular episodes, because I think it's that rule of five in terms of only buying 5 things a year that are new and really making good choices about where they come from, what fabrics they are, is something that a lot of people make sense and they've chosen to embrace. So I think I've probably got less and I'm wearing that more. So yes.
Amazing. Yeah, Tiffany Dark's really, really inspiring. Is there a style tip that you learned during your time over the 100 episodes that has stuck out for you?
Do you know what my biggest tip that I talk about is, we talk a lot about from like a mindset perspective, we talk a lot about you've got to get in your discomfort to grow. And I know I've just talked about it, in terms of launching the podcast. Feel the fear, feel the cringe, and do it anyway. Kind of move into that area of uncomfortable, like be there and then grow and grow and grow. I think the biggest thing for me is to do that in every area of your life apart from clothing, because the most important thing for me in clothing is being physically comfortable, and that is about actually feeling good in what you're wearing and not having clothing that distracts you from feeling good. So many people talk to me about, I always ask most memorable fashion moment, and I get some beautiful ones, some amazing moments, but so many people also talk about a moment where they chose something that looked great but they physically sat in discomfort. And we all know what a distraction it is when you don't physically feel at ease in what you're wearing. And I always think the best thing that you can do, actually, from a clothing perspective, is not sit in your discomfort, because it will just be a massive distraction. Case in point, we went on camera and I was like, Loulou, I hate the dress I'm wearing. And you had to wait 2 minutes for me to go up and change, because I knew if I felt uncomfortable in what I was wearing, I wouldn't have been in a mindset where I would have been as kind of conscious about the conversation, because I'd have been looking at the camera, like hating how it looked, wondering if it looked awkward. And I think don't sit in physical discomfort in what you wear is the most important thing. If you've got something that you put it on and you're second guessing yourself, just get rid of it.
Yeah, I think it's so important. I talk a lot, as you know, about, listening to your alarm words. And I think so often people ignore them. Oh, it'll do, it's fine, it should be good enough. It was fine for me last time. And I love the fact that you went and changed, because I would rather someone was just actually stood up for themselves really in that moment and said, I want to do a good job for you, and therefore I want to feel comfortable in myself. And I think so often we ignore it. We really, really do. And I think nowadays there's so many amazing brands out there that can help you feel more comfortable, that you don't have to put up with it.
Yeah, totally agree. And I think that don't settle is important, actually, not just from physical discomfort, but I think from an online perspective, we buy so much online now. And I always worry or kind of think that if you buy 2 or 3 tops online, it's that third top that you think, I'll just keep it because returning it's too difficult, which is the one that you'd have handed back in the changing room, or maybe 2 of them. And I think, if you're buying stuff online, do not settle. It's still got to be something that you would want to wear when you wake up tomorrow over everything else you've got already.
Yeah. Have you found from shopping less that how you shop has changed, or do you feel, are you stepping into more stores, or do you feel like you're still doing a lot of online?
I think before I would have bought pieces, not really knowing why I was going to wear them or what they were going to go with. And now I'm thinking more about what do I own and what do I need. And the bit that has come up loads, and actually I think you might have said it, Loulou, when we were on a podcast before, is, you should be buying things that take you towards the person that you want to be. So how do I see myself now? How do I want to see myself kind of grow in the future? And therefore, how do I want to dress? And really thinking about that.
Amazing. Right. Slight change of tack. I want to ask you, what have you not given yourself credit for doing these 100 podcasts?
I think that the stamina, probably.
Mm-hmm.
And the stamina of kind of carrying on doing it, and all of the thinking time I've put into it. I think I do so much in a week. I'm working from Monday to Thursday on my day job in consultancy, and then Friday is my day for this. And I've got 2 young kids, and that I sometimes think, I look back over a period of 6 weeks and I'm like, gosh, I've launched 6 podcasts, I've recorded, I don't know how many podcasts, maybe like 5 or 6 podcasts. I've done my job. I've managed to keep 2 people alive. Like, probably just the combination of the parts. And I really felt it actually a few weeks ago. I was just at the point where I was exhausted, and I went away for 3 nights with some friends, and it was just the breath, literally the breath that I needed to not think for 3 days about anything apart from being in the present, not planning anything, not thinking that I had to contact anyone, not wondering when I was going to fit something in, just enjoying being in the present, and also being literally bitten alive by mosquitoes. It was not a good look. But
no,
I think we forget how much we do and how busy we are, how many different plates we are spinning at one time. So I think probably haven't given myself enough credit for all of that.
I don't know how you get it all done. I mean, I think it's absolutely incredible. Anyone that's listening to this, you will not be getting a podcast once a week from me, because I know I can't manage it. But
I think It's important though, isn't it, to be clear about what, as we said before, what are your boundaries? What are you willing to do? What are you willing to not do as well? And giving yourself the permission to do that. And also not feeling bad if something doesn't get posted on time or a newsletter doesn't go out or whatever it is, because, it's not the end of the world.
No, it really isn't. It really isn't. So tell me a little bit about your dreams for the future for the podcast. Like, do you have a dream guest? What would you like to be doing this full time? Like, what are we plotting here?
It's a good question. I mean, obviously, plan is to take on Diary of the CEO, but I think we're a little bit. I think for me, and I said before, the analytics don't matter, and I think you've got to be realistic. There's so many podcasts out there, but that shouldn't deter you from starting. And we were talking about it with some other people the other day, and they said it's such a saturated market, and I said, yeah, but if someone offered you a book deal, you wouldn't say, I'm not going to write that book because there's loads of books out there already, because Waterstones is full of books. And it's the same thing. I think, if you're creating something great and people are engaging with it, it doesn't matter that there's other things to read or watch or do. It's this, you've just got to kind of embrace it and keep going. And for me, the dream is that it continues to build. And as long as I continue to get people messaging me, which I do each week, and saying, I enjoyed that, or I learned something for that, or I was thinking about you and the podcast, because that for me is already a dream come true. I will say that Jo Elvin was definitely my dream guest, who I'm launching with on Friday, because, and I told her this, glamour for me was so, I loved magazines growing up, everything from, Girl Talk, Twinkle, Bunty, Sugar, Ms, Just 17, and then the Glamour, the Cosmopolitan, the Company. When I was getting married, it was like the treat of wedding magazines. So I loved, and obviously all of like Grazia and Heat and Now and all those absolute like trash magazines of the time. But I loved magazines. So I think for me, she was the first guest I wanted to interview, and she turned out to be my 100th, but I'm happy with that. So it has enabled me in so many ways to achieve so many dreams. I think I don't quite know what I want it to be, but if it keeps kind of fulfilling me in this way, that's good enough for me.
And I just love that it all came from a place of, being shut down and, told no. It actually was your opportunity to kind of say, okay, well, it can't be external. I'm going to have to do this for myself. And I can really see that your love of magazines has kind of evolved into the conversations, that you now have. And with such a kind of huge range of people, from people who are very high up within the corporate world to, everyday stylists to your mom, like you've really, interviewed such a range of people.
Yeah. And I think that's where I would say, if you're starting a podcast, I don't think because someone isn't necessarily in the industry or the box that you imagine you need a guest to be in, they're not going to be right. So I had a doctor from the ER in the States message me and say, she loved clothes, she wanted to come on the podcast. And I thought, what's this going to be like? And it was incredible. It was one of the best podcasts I've done. And the feedback, I was absolutely phenomenal, because the perspective that she brought to dress and trust and how they link on it was just something that I was mind blown by it. And I think that's the other thing, if you're doing a podcast and you're learning something from it, it doesn't matter if one person listens to it, or 100 people, or 1,000 people, or 1,000,000 people. It matters if you've taken something from it.
Yeah, it's such good advice. I was going to ask you who was the most surprising guest, so that feels really fitting.
Yeah,
I mean,
I think
the incredible thing about it is we all get dressed, so
yeah.
you could essentially interview everyone, because everyone's got a relationship with clothes.
I think that was fantastic. I think Cindy Gallop was absolutely phenomenal as well. She said something very shocking on the podcast, which she said in a TED talk, and I won't say it because listen to the podcast with her, and you'll work out, you'll know exactly which line it is. But I think she really made me think. But do you know what? I would say every guest has made me think in a different way, and that's the important thing.
Yeah, I love how Cindy Gallop really embraces her sensuality, sexuality, is unapologetically horny, like, and powerful. Like, she is, the way she also will go on, say yes to any way that she can get her message out there. Because she runs Make Love Not Porn, and they can't advertise it, so she has to do everything to get herself out there. She's a really powerful woman. Were you a little bit? Do you ever get intimidated before you interview?
Yes, completely. Every single person I get intimidated. They're in the hot seat for you, but you've got to make and help them kind of, I guess, feel comfortable and make it shape the conversation in the way that works for you. So yeah, there's a bit of jitters. There's a bit of jitters before I record every podcast, but there's far more jitters before every podcast goes out, because you want to know what the response is, and you kind of pin all of these hopes and anxieties and opportunities on, are people going to love it? So it's the feedback that's important. So if you listen to someone's podcast and you enjoy it, tell them.
Yeah, great advice. Well, I feel like, I mean, we're hitting half an hour. I'm going to have to take your advice and feel like this is the moment to kind of wrap things up. I have to ask you, I have to throw your question that you ask every guest to yourself. Are you stressed or are you well dressed?
I'm probably the most stressed person that I know, and everyone tells me that. But more and more, kind of through this, everything that I'm doing, I am trying to get into a well-dressed state of mind, which is for me the important thing.
And
Yeah,
what is
every
it?
day.
Tell me a bit more about what a well-dressed state of mind is. What would you say?
I guess for me, well dressed is about setting yourself up for success. And it's about it's feeling good in whatever situation you're in. It's feeling, and I always say, whatever you're wearing, whatever you're doing, well dressed is a mindset. I'm good to go. I'm well dressed. I'm in a good place. I feel like I've got what I need, whether it's experience, whether it's confidence, whether it's the clothes, whether it's a combination of all of those, whether it's support, that I feel good today. So I guess every day it's about making a conscious decision to say, I'm going to wake up every day and I'm going to feel well dressed.
Amazing. Well, I'm so glad the podcast brought us together and that I can call you my friend. I'm very grateful for that. I find you so inspiring. As I said, I don't know how you get it all done, but keep sharing your advice and connecting us with these incredible minds and reminding us to, be intentional about dressing and for it to not feel frivolous. And I think that's what I love about what you're sharing, is that it is something that is really important and that we mustn't feel guilty about looking good.
Yeah, we absolutely. In fact, someone told me, one of the guests told me, that it is absolutely crucial for our kind of development that we allow ourselves to feel good and we recognize that, and it's not narcissistic at all. So I definitely agree with that. Loulou, thank you so much for having me on the podcast. I've loved the conversations around, we did a Christmas special, but you also came on and talked about how you use language and words as part of your styling, and having been through your workshop as well, I know how powerful it can be. So again, keep on going. I'm excited to see what's to come.
Thank you. Thanks for coming on. See you soon.